friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about a podcast. I sincerely can't remember the last time I came on here and chatted with you guys about a podcast. It is sort of a twofold reason. The first is because I haven't really been listening to as many podcasts as I normally do. My consumption has been on the down low because I haven't been doing as much long distance driving, and I'm someone who only really listens to podcasts when I'm in the car unless a podcast really captivates me, because I'm naturally somebody who's not the greatest with audio and being totally zoned into audio, but for some reason driving and listening is just sort of a natural thing as I listen to music, and so I can listen to podcasts. The other reason I haven't talked about a podcast is because I feel like recently I've hit a real slump with podcast quality or podcasts of interest. I think I've just listened to a lot of mediocre podcasts, but that all changes with the podcast I want to talk to you about today, and that is iHeartRadio's Monster DC Sniper. The episodes initially started airing in January, but I certainly did not come across it until all the episodes were out, and thank goodness, because I binged it. A little bit of backstory before I talk about the premise of this particular podcast. The DC Sniper Monster is just a season or just an iteration of other versions of the Monster podcast from iHeartRadio. It started with the Atlanta Monster, which is focused on the serial murders that took place in Atlanta, Georgia in the 80s. I listened to it, I enjoyed it, but it's not as good as DC Sniper. Then the second season came out, which was Zodiac Killer, and I enjoyed that. I didn't know a lot about the Zodiac Killer, and I thought that was well done as well, so that was interesting. But DC Sniper blows them all away. Essentially, the focus of this season of Monster is on a series of shootings that occurred in the greater DC, Maryland area in 2002. I had never heard about these things. It's, to me, shocking. I mean, I guess it's not that shocking because I was only 11 when this was going on, so why would I know about mass shootings randomly happening? But basically what was going on is for about a month, there were a series of killings where people were just being randomly shot and killed with a sniper rifle. And people who were dying were people who were just out doing errands. There was a person who was shot and killed vacuuming their car at a local car wash. There were a number of people who were shot and killed in parking lots, leaving Home Depot or the grocery store, and people who were just pumping gas. There didn't seem to be a rhyme or reason or a profile to this, and what made this most horrific, it was happening in mostly broad daylight, and they had no leads. These murders were so random and they were happening in such short bursts that the police weren't able to get a whole lot of information. So it was terrifying. It sounds like a terrifying time to live through. And why I like the podcast so much and why I think it was so well done is you get to hear from most of the key players who were involved. It's one of the more modern podcasts I've listened to. A lot of the true crime that I've listened to prior to this is the 80s, the 90s, even earlier. And in a lot of those situations, people have unfortunately passed away, or they are very far removed from it, or evidence is no longer as fruitful. And even though 2002 is still ahead of where we are now with this, the consumption and access to information the way it is now, a lot of the people that were a part of it who were reporting on this, they actually can give you real clips of the reportings. They talk to the key officers and detectives and FBI people who were a part of this, which is really interesting. And they talk to key players, people who were close to the two people who ultimately were charged and convicted of these crimes. There's a lot of content to cover. There's a timeline. There are multiple people who were killed. I mean, it's a really high number of deaths and victims, which is awful. So there's a lot to keep track of there. So there's a lot of people to talk to. There are people that are in the podcast who witnessed some of the people who were killed. There also are people who were victims of the crimes in here as well. And the other complexity of this whole conversation is that the two guys who ultimately are the shooters, they have a really weird backstory that is integral to what led to what they did, but like you gotta take the time to learn it. So not only is there all that going on and it's very coherent, but it's very captivating. The way they frame the story, the way they narrate it, the main narrator of the story has a very captivating voice. He's very interesting to listen to, and I thought it was so well done, and I haven't been pulled into a podcast like this in probably a year. Like, it's been a really, really long time. So I would say if you're somebody who likes true crime, but is looking to hear about reporting and the way they found these people and what their backstory is, and you're just looking to learn about this awful moment in the greater DC area history in 2002, it is so captivating. I highly recommend this podcast for you. Even if you're not somebody who likes those things, I still think it's really interesting and I would still recommend it. And like I said when I started this whole thing, there's been a lot of mediocre podcasts that have been drifting in between my ears that it's just been so refreshing to have really enjoyed this. Speaking of that, if you want to know about some podcasts that I have found to be mediocre, let me know in the comments below. I kind of just have chosen to not normally talk about podcasts that I think are just okay, because why would I pester you with just podcasts that aren't worthy of listening to? But maybe you want to know. I have no idea. With all of that said, I hope you enjoyed hearing about this podcast. If you've listened to it, let me know your thoughts about it. And if you have any recommendations for like absolutely captivating gold podcasts, please share them with me down below, because I would like to start listening to more podcasts. I would like to have a list of decent ones and not just keep churning through these so-so podcasts that are mostly in my library right now. I appreciate you stopping by and spending some of your day with me, and I'll talk to you in the next video.